Highlights or lowlights from yesterday, moments that stand out to you as significant or helpful? Good.
That's a big question.
What was the question?
Anything meaningful or anything meaningful productive from yesterday?
The worship around the table was very meaningful.
Yeah.
So, the dinner table, all of the service.
Thank you, JP.
Yeah, the table session was quite interesting. It was nice to share heresy.
Yes.
Yeah.
I meant to tell you guys that when I was in seminary, the professor in my preaching class had a placard that was well worn in black, and they call it when you go to the store and you cover it with plastic, piece of paper covered in laminated. Sorry, he had a laminated card that was all beat up, and then all it had was a big red H on it. And whenever you said something you thought was you couldn't back up or it was heresy, he would hold up the H card, and if you got 2 H cards, you were done. And so
In a day or in the whole?
no, in your class, right?
Okay.
So
Can we redo tomorrow? Yes.
yes, exactly. There are people in my congregation. I've told the story, and so they'll be like, when I did that thing, like from John 7, they're like, I might have to hold up the H card here. That's glad you picked that up.
And an E, and an L, and an L.
We did that at Len's place with the guy from Regent
Little Stackhouse.
Stackhouse. They were like, I'm throwing, what did he? Oh, the bullshit flag. That's right.
Yeah. He was great. Yeah, I enjoyed serving communion to each other. That was cool. That was a nice way to end the table. Yeah, that was cool. That felt like it was complete as opposed to just over.
I appreciated how much time we spent yesterday morning in this conversation.
Yeah.
Because we went places with the text that a 20-minute motion would not have occurred. And the way we looked at it from multiple angles, and then how we ended was really powerful for me to think about God going out there and getting beat up, looking for us, to woo us. You got to take the sexual innuendo out of it to come at it from that standpoint, but to know God in an intimate way, there is a lot there. So that was powerful for me.
Yeah. And what about looking forward? I mean, we're at the halfway mark. If you could wave a magic wand and guarantee that you were going to get what you needed or what you hoped for in the next 24 hours, what would it be?
I think my favorite is just the fresh perspective that is offered when we're all participating in one thing and then taking various points away, just like what happened yesterday morning, where we're all looking at the same thing, but there was an aha, a collective moment that made it much more rich.
Yeah. What it says.
Yeah, I think like just the little sparks like that. In fact, the breviary we just watched, we're doing a project right now that's similar where we're narrating readings because we're going through 1 John, but we're doing chapter a week. And we're designing some other stuff around it weekly for people, but for the key Sunday piece, we've talked about how we're doing that, and they filmed one already. And I like it, but I liked the fresh take. So sometimes it's just like a thing here and a thing here that sparks further creativity or innovation in something that we might be working on.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought that was really special what you guys did. I don't know, what song was it?
I don't know. Psalm 168, maybe 138. Can't be 168.
Yeah,
It's
it's only 168.
Aaron's Kyrie, where we went through the house.
Mhm.
It can't be 168. It's the real one.
You saw 122, I saw 116, I don't know which one you clicked.
It's really good. Really good.
Yeah, I think, yesterday we had a lot more downtime than prior retreats. We started doing that more. That feels really nice, just everybody hanging out, talking, not feeling like you gotta stay on task. Because it's not like, everybody here has a ton of ministry experience, a ton of education, a ton of observation, so it's nice when those things sort of pop out organically. Yeah. Cool. Well, today we're going to start again with Bible study, then we'll take a little break, go upstairs for a session on innovation. Also, before lunch, we'll do our swag, something for each of you. If you brought something that you want to share, then that'll be the time. And if you brought something that you want to share with everybody, then just be prepared to give a short little introduction to it. Tell us what it is before you pass it out. And that way people can appreciate it a little better. Because sometimes if something's just sitting there in front of you on the table, you're not really sure, what it is or where it came from. And of course, a lot of those things have great stories. We'll take a break for lunch around 12:30, 1 o'clock, walk down to the Dirty Bird, assuming the weather holds, it's supposed to. So that'll be a lot of fun. Then we'll come back here for a session in the afternoon, take some free time, and then dinner. Dave is going to grill for us outside, which is great. And maybe Kells, can you accompany him to prime cuts or something? And make sure that, I was going to say that there's vegetables, but we had so many vegetables from Jamin yesterday. I don't know that I can have any.
No, we got a few.
Yeah.
I have a
There might be
question.
some lobster mac and cheese in our future.
Ooh.
Ooh. Wow.
There might
No,
Do I? Why are you laughing?
because I saw you pick it up in the store yesterday.
Lobster mac and cheese is the bomb.
How are you going to grill it?
It's just served with something.
Oh, yeah.
I was gonna
Grill it.
if it's cool, could I work with our chef and just prior to dinner, we'll open 4 or 5 bottles of the wine.
Sure,
And everybody
absolutely.
wants to sit around the table and taste them. And then your swag is, don't have like 8 bottles of each varietal. Should I have 2 or 3?
Yeah.
And then if there's one you really like, your swag is to take a bottle of wine.
That's great.
So there may be one you like and somebody else likes something
Yeah,
else.
fight it.
Anyway, but if y'all are cool with that, we'll just text or we'll talk about what time that needs to be to not get into dinner too much. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, besides, you're gonna be working up a thirst.
I know I'm gonna be doing a project.
A lot of people like to drink wine when they build a fence.
Yeah, I'm gonna wait till we built the fence
I
and
know,
then I'm gonna start
drink
drinking.
after.
Nope, no, the first fence post is very straight after that. Yeah. Oh, man. And then again, we'll be up in the screening room, the library tonight. We'll look at, I think, just 2 short films from yesterday. And I find those, I really like hearing what you have to say about those short films. Because learning how to exegete culture is a critical skill for Christian ministry. Like finding out where the people are, what's at the bleeding edge of culture, who the innovators are out there. And usually the innovators aren't the people that are on the top 40 list. They're not the people that are selling out stadiums. I mean, true innovation happens at the bleeding edge. And sometimes you have great ideas that just don't quite click yet. So our last retreat, we watched these DJs in the cloisters at the Met. And I thought it was going to be so cool. It was awful. It was so bland. And yet the idea keeps rolling around in my head. There were so many things about it, so many ways that we could have done something, I think, a little better than what they did. And I think about the films we watched last night, the stuff we watched today. I go, that's where we get all our new ideas from. That's where we ferment, and that's where we start to grow. And so I hope that you participate eagerly, and then after that we'll enjoy some of the finer things. And historically, Friday nights are the later night, so sleep in the afternoon if you need to. And then this morning, Jay is going to take us through the Bible. We're in John chapter 2, is that what you said?
John chapter 2.
Yeah, the Gospel of John chapter 2.
Gospel of John chapter 2.
Right.
Bless you.
Great.
There's probably nothing nothing that relates me closer to God our Father like beginnings, like the formation of anything, the creation of a new product, a new resource that we make, I think the timing that God, the Holy Spirit, and Jesus has in the narrative of the story, of the narrative of everything that's about us, is one of the most fascinating and beautiful things to see. And I love seeing what's underneath the story. A lot of times I don't, I glaze over something that I've read or heard of 100 or 1,000 times. I haven't grown up in a church environment, and then pastored and prayed and preached and been a ton of stuff. Sometimes you get a fresh perspective when you enter into dialogue. And just like yesterday's form, I would say let's do a couple of disciplines that I like to incorporate into my style of learning, and then just obviously have dialogue about what we see, what we hear, what we kind of know. So if somebody wants to start reading in the book of Gospel of John chapter 2, just do let's stop after verse 11.
Wedding at Cana, that's where you're going?
Yeah, let's go with the wedding.
On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus' disciples were also invited to the celebration. When the wine ran out, Jesus' mother said to him, "They don't have any wine." Verse 4, Jesus replied, "Woman, what does that have to do with me? My time hasn't come yet." His mother told the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby were 6 stone water jars used for the Jewish cleansing ritual, each able to hold about 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some from them and take it to the head waiter," and they did. The head waiter tasted the water that had become wine. He didn't know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. The head waiter called the groom and said, "Everyone serves the good wine first. They bring out the second-rate wine only when the guests are drinking freely. You kept the good wine until now." This was the first miraculous sign that Jesus did in Cana of Galilee. He revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him.
Growing up in the Free Methodist Church, participation in the finer things were not not something that people did publicly. It was something that those that participated in the finer things almost did in a space of shame and in a space of, for lack of a better term, naughtiness, and you really straddle that line between am I omitting, am I lying, am I living in this double space? And I never reconciled my entire teenage into adulthood. I never reconciled, even being one of the prominent leaders in our space, I never reconciled with the fact that Jesus participated in this act at this time and in these spaces, and obviously some of you know there's all kinds of theories on, well, it wasn't really wine and it wasn't really this or that, but I just want to like break down beyond however you feel about the finer things. Let's just break down the majesty of what's happening here. So what's happened before chapter 2? Just spit it out. What's happened? It's only been a little bit since we've even been introduced to Jesus in this gospel. So what's gone on?
Connects it back to Genesis creation.
Connects back to Genesis creation, the beginning of all these kinds of things.
Calls the disciples.
Chapter 1 has a funny thing that says, when he saw Jesus passing by, he said,
Yeah.
"Look, the Lamb of God." And the disciples heard him say this. They followed Jesus. Turning around, Jesus saw them falling and asked, "What do you want?" Funny thing, right? Like Jesus talking with people and asking just basic questions. And the story kind of goes along with calling some more people, and all of a sudden they find themselves in a situation where a couple days later an invitation happened to go to a wedding. And the story here says Jesus' mother was already there. And Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." Which in my mind, if I want to look at the context here, this is like the ultimate Instagram fail, right? Like the party's about to be over. In this culture, likely there could have been a fine. There could have been some serious ramifications to the idea that the wine is gone, and what are we to do about it? It's just funny that Jesus responds to his mom in an endearing way. I like the New Living Transition that says, dear woman." This one says, "Woman, why do you involve me?" The Spanish translation says, "This is not our problem." And if I read the text, I see Jesus' mom making a statement, not even a request. There's no more wine. and at some point, Jesus is like, "Oh, I know what she wants. I know what you're asking for."
Which is crazy because he hasn't done any miracles
Anything.
yet. So how, like, what's he supposed to do? Go to the store?
And the response is fun. "Why do you involve me? Why is this our problem? My hour has not yet come." What we talked about is, but my timing is not here. But the funny thing is, just earlier, he was called the Lamb of God, and there's already some kind of recognition to some of the kinds of things. So timing and understanding of what's happening and what Jesus said. Sometimes I feel like Jesus changes his mind, and then I'm like, I just don't understand it.
I've always loved Mary's response. Do what he tells you to do. It's almost like, we both know you're going to take care of that. I mean, it's a mother's, and if any of you have a parent like that, you can relate, or somebody in your life like.
But
He's
dig
gonna
into that part, because that's the next verse, right? He says, "My hour has not come."
Right.
And then what? Like he walks away, or like there's no more dialogue with him. So at some point, the response that his mother had was to who? To the servants,
whatever he
right?
tells
To the
you.
servants, the servants that were taking care of the stuff. Do whatever he tells you. And the narrative says, nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding 20 to 30 gallons. So I did a little bit of the research, and 30 gallons of water would have been about 249 pounds. If these were stone jars and they were holding 30 gallons, they were probably about 50 pounds each of a stone jar. So they're not exactly small vessels. They were probably about waist high, because you know what happened in the ceremonial washing. There was splashing, there was dipping, there was all kinds of stuff that you had to kind of get to. And it's not like you're going to be drawing down under there. They had to be pretty filled up to get in there. So they were around. They were probably a part of the wedding process. And now they're empty. So standing by the jars, Jesus says to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." And sometimes I wish that the Bible had this like a soundtrack attached to it, so you could understand like some more emotion around what's happening, because it's like Jesus just says this to random people after his mom said to the servants, do whatever he tells you. He comes around, Jesus says, fill the jars with water. And I guess they did it, because the immediate story goes into they filled them to the brim. And when he told them, and then he told them, now draw some out and take them to the master of the banquet. Let's just stop for a second and realize that there's no hose, right? It's not like it's easy to fill these kinds of things. So either the servants had to pick up the jars, carry these 50-pound jars, 6 of these jars, down to the river, and then carry them about 300 pounds heavier back, or they had to bucket them in pails and bring them over and constantly. So how long could you imagine filling 6 jars with 30 gallons each, and then it's just filled to the brim? How long do you think that could have possibly taken? A while, right? It's not like it was like immediate. It's not like there was like a suspenseful moment here. Like, this is why I want a soundtrack. Like, the Three Stooges picking up buckets and walking around, filling this stuff up. There had to be some kind of, the narrative doesn't tell you what emotions they were going through, right?
Well, and there's no indication at this point that filling these ceremonial jars is going to have anything
Do
to
anything.
do with wine.
Right.
Anything.
Right, so they don't know, oh, we're doing this because it's going to become wine. So I've always envisioned that these jars had been used for ceremonial cleaning.
Now they're
For a
empty.
portion. Well, no, my thought was there's dirty water.
Yeah, they're gross.
Okay, because they've been dipping in their hands. And what I don't know enough about the study is how often those would be changed out, right?
I mean,
Maybe daily if it's a.
But if it's for
ongoing-
all the wedding guests, you know, and like, even if they change it up that morning,
It's
you
still
got-
gonna be dirty.
Yeah.
And I've always envisioned this was later in the day, not early morning.
well, they already ran out of wine, so something's been going on for a
Well,
while.
And I've just a little side humor. If you ever preach this, I always love to say this. Notice, go back and read this. They don't run out of wine until after Jesus and the disciples.
That's amazing.
So these guys know how to party,
Yeah.
right? I mean, they're part of the running out of wine.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Right.
That's why his mom is like, hey, they
You
ran
guys
out of
just drank all
wine.
this. You just part to take care of that. Oh, you almost get this sense because the 12 men coming in.
Well, it said they were ready to drink, and when the wine was gone.
Yeah.
So like some time has passed. Right?
Correct.
Yeah, this is exactly.
There was wine when they got there.
And now there's not. And there wasn't 12 yet.
Well, you're right.
What are you doing?
Was it? There's like 4 of them. Well, Jesus just stopped
And
it.
it was a family, so who got invited to wedding? Family? Got invited friends,
Yeah.
friends, some of the stuff.
Probably
It's
his
family, right?
That's Jesus.
That's family.
He shows up late to a family wedding
3 days late.
with other people.
Well, he shows
With
up.
friends.
Uninvited.
Oh, wait.
He did that.
Everybody had a +1 and Jesus had +3.
Yeah. No, he's got all of them now. As I double
Oh, does he have all of them?
He's got-
Okay, good. I'm worried. It's better for me to have to say they all drank.
All right, well, it's,
But it is funny.
Okay.
You're not gonna throw the heresy card up.
3 days late to a family wedding with a bunch of his friends. You're like, your mom is so mad at you.
no, not only that, he had only met them a little while ago. Like, hey, I'm gonna go to a party later. You want to hang?
It's like that early date you have, and they're like, I have this wedding. You want to be my +1?
Plus
Great.
11.
Well, and I just,
Well,
well, we'll get into something else, but why John starts here.
well, okay, this is. It's interesting that he starts here, and fascinating enough, the end of the time was also in consuming of wine and a wedding type
Oh, yeah,
feast and a celebration to the deal. So it's an interesting bookend
that he started.
that Jesus starts and then he concludes with in this space. So the 6 ceremonial stone water jars were filled at some point, and it's not like the servants at this wedding were wearing junky clothes, right? They're probably wearing clothes fitting to serve at a wedding. They're prepared to do what they need to do. And Jesus asked them to fill, very, very firmly says, fill the jars with water. And a response is that they fill them. The result was draw some out and take them to the master banquet. They did so, and the master banquet tasted the water and that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. So let's just stop for 1 second there for that. Can you imagine the grumbling that was happening in the process of filling these jars? They didn't know. I'm stupid. I don't know what this is for.
Yeah, why are we doing this?
Why are we doing this?
You don't drink water.
But at what point do you think that the wine turned, or the water turned into the wine? The text said,
I envisioned, this is weird, I figured it would have been put into the cup because it's the master. It's going to, but I almost picture a ladle. I always had a ladle in my mind. Into a big pot of soup. And it was like, you know how you taste it? Like, is this good? Oh no, it needs more salt. Right? You know, it was almost like still the process of the wine was still happening, if that makes sense.
but think through the imagery of the servants who are going to give the master of banquets water. What kind of dialogue could have been happening among them?
You do it. I don't want to be responsible for that.
Dirty water.
Yeah, but there's various versions of the text, but the versions say, they all essentially say, and when the jars were filled, they served the master of banquets. Jesus didn't say, about halfway through filling those jars, go give some to the guy and more stuff. He doesn't give the end result. He just gives the basic instruction. There's how many words? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 words in the instructions. Fill the jars with water. And then the jars were filled, and the instructions were taken somehow and taken to the master at banquets. After having done so, what happened? There's a response, right?
My translation's not clear as to when the water turns white. I don't know if yours is more clear in verse 9. If you could read it, it says, in the ESV, it says, when the master of the feast tasted the water now become wine. So if somebody else has a different translation, maybe that's indicating that the water then became wine. But in mine, it's ambiguous.
Yeah, it's ambiguous.
Yeah. But I mean, still the point being that they fill them up with water. You don't drink water. They're instructed to give something you don't drink to the guy who's in charge. And then he tastes it, and it's the best wine ever.
But there's a principle in the response, and that's the miraculous happen or manifest have to be obedience.
But at what point in the obedience?
Well, I mean, it's
Once
obedience,
everything's
like compliance.
That's compliance, right?
Yeah.
But once the obedience was completed, the instructions were completed.
The instructions were fill all of the jars.
Yeah.
As soon as
And
it
they
was
were
filled,
filled
it
to the
said,
brim.
Yeah.
gave it to them.
And when they were full,
It was filled, he said, give to the master. That was the final instruction, if you will. And then,
Well, I don't think the servants had a choice. Like, you fill the water
Yeah, right.
and you give it to them. Either way, you're screwed. Like, if it goes bad.
there's several points that are happening for me in the narrative, and one of them is that servants who had no choice, like you said, were a part of a miraculous experience before everybody else.
Yeah.
In a way,
That's a great-
Jesus
that's great
gives value to the people who were doing the act of obedience,
Yeah.
regardless of whether they had the choice or not. The fact is that these people were servants, so they were at the bottom barrel. And Jesus often brings credit or brings value or brings credibility or gives testimony to women, to servants, to folks who were at the bottom of the food chain. And they had, and it's interesting because at what point did the disciples believe in him? Verse 11. So who's got it?
What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first signs for which he revealed the glory, and his disciples
Believed in him. And at verse 9, the servants who had drawn the water knew. It's an interesting thing that the guys that Jesus just called to follow him were not the first to see the miracles of Jesus happen. It's the people who were the most obedient. And I also think it's interesting that Jesus didn't have the disciples do it. But why would you ask your friends to come and work right away, right?
You know, I've always asked of this text, is this really his first miracle? Who did the miracle? He didn't pray.
Right.
He didn't look up to heaven. He didn't even touch the jars. So it's beautiful that it's their hands the whole time doing all the things.
Doing what, though?
Doing what he says.
The work.
That's what John 1 though, doesn't it? I mean, the first part of John 1 is just the whole creation speaks it. He doesn't do anything but speak it into existence. And he just says, go fill the water jar. And it seems like it fits the.
How does he know that's going to happen? I mean,
How does he know that's going to happen?
like he's Jesus, right? But Philippians, right? The kenosis, he empties himself of his divine privileges. He doesn't know the future. He's intelligent. He's intuitive, so he can guess what's going to happen. He can see the writing on the wall, so to speak. He knows that the Father operates in miraculous power. He knows he has a prophetic anointing in his life. But if this is the first time, how do you know it's gonna like if you ever tried out your miracle power before? How do you know that if they do what I say, this thing that I haven't told them is going to happen? Like Jesus never says it'll become wine, right? He never tells them what's going to happen.
But why do you think that is?
Well, it's conjecture. There's no
Yeah,
guess.
he said it. No, he said it.
What did
Verse
he
4. If Jesus
They
had
have no
revealed what his plan was, he would also be revealing himself, who he was, what he can do,
So
the essence of his being, right?
It's a huge theme there, John. Like,
It's a huge
an hour
theme.
is not even going.
The
The
hour
timing's gotta be right.
The inception of this whole thing. But also Jesus leaves so many nuggets for people all the time. And in this case, how many people knew what Jesus said? I mean, it's not like he's proclaiming, servants, right? The woman, his mom, turned and said to the servants, whatever he asked her to do, just do it.
How did
Basically,
she know that though?
Yeah, right. If he's never done it before,
Right.
yeah.
I feel like Mary's been like, hey, you know that thing you do for me all the time?
Yeah.
Just the other day?
maybe. Well, okay, and so then this flips the script on who had faith in Jesus first.
Well, I mean, Mary's story, she
Yeah.
treasured the things in her heart.
Right,
I mean, she has
She
known
knows.
all along. I also think that he must have had, and we all know this in ministry, when you see people who are not fully in ministry, but have a presence,
Yeah,
right? Like he was filled with the Holy Spirit. Like people must have sensed something
Good gravity.
about him. Yeah, that he had, even though he wasn't fully completely saying, I'm gonna take on my full authority.
Well, because John the Baptist is a significant ministry at this point, and John acknowledges Jesus.
As a Lamb of God.
Yeah, and then Jesus starts gathering followers who almost all come up to him, and his engagement and his encounters with them are all impressive. Like, here is an Israelite with whatever it is, true Israelite, genuine Israelite. So he's got swagger.
I imagine that Mary, from the time he is a kid, is investing in him, saying, "You are special.
Yeah.
You are made for something. You are like God." You know, she's
Yeah.
pouring this into him.
But also, that wouldn't have been hidden either. In her family,
They knew.
they knew, right?
That's James.
John Baptist flipped in the womb, he knew what was going on.
I'm always fascinated by how amazing Jesus was as a teacher. He was such a gifted teacher. I think people were drawn to his ability. So I'm always fascinated by a lot of people in my family when I was a kid. A lot of people feel like they're asking me to do things. So I feel like not in any way like that ask Jesus, hey, can you turn water into wine?
Yeah.
But just that how artful I had to be when I was a principal and working with staff, working with my family. They'd ask me to do something, I would say yes, but not be careful not to do the work for them, not do the work, do work with them. And like, there's so many things. Of course, Jesus was doing everything by the way of fulfilling what he was supposed to do. His whole work was, I'm fulfilling everything that's been written. And it's a future, the present. I mean, that's what a tremendous thing. In that moment, they go, all right, where's the flow chart for this? I can think of all the things that I can do to make sure this is the moment that I'm kind of doing it, but not doing it. I'm like, wow, that is fascinating.
That's why I think like the ceremonial jars, it's important to focus on that.
Yeah.
It points to the fulfillment. And the size of them, it's 1,000 bottles of wine, 180 gallons.
180 gallons.
1,000 bottles of wine. Corey brought only 24.
Damn him.
That's not even close to 1,000.
So not only that,
It shows the wealth of his family. You know, that they have servants, they can afford a second batch of 1,000 bottles. How many?
that there was another batch of
Of
that
1,000
wine.
bottles. And can we address the elephant in the room? Jesus sasses his mom.
I think
Like,
that's,
I would have got backhand.
I think that's overdone.
Is it?
I think
I
it's
look
probably
at the
over.
word. I hear people carry on about the word. Maybe.
He's the oldest son. He's the one responsible.
Well, he's 30 years old. He's the boss.
So I'm saying, she's going, what are you going to do about it?
Wait, I want to hear it.
So this is where, I mean, this whole passage is rife with foreshadowing. It's-
Exactly.
Jesus is his blood, his wine, is the purification for his people.
Of dirty water, right?
Yeah, and I think the reason, in my opinion, that he uses the word woman is because the very first prophetic word about him is Genesis. The woman will give birth to sons on the snake. And this is all about the time. It isn't here yet. It is coming. Here's the sign of my blood.
It's now here.
It's
And
like,
when he's saying woman, he's just, John's doing what he always does, especially through Revelation.
Yeah.
Just a little nugget of one callback.
Little
to
bread
a verse.
trail.
So we'd be like, Genesis 3. Okay, this is the guy.
and she's probably she probably showed up to his friends, right? So that, like, if he's going to address, unless he's like, stop, mom, he's pointing to the fact that she's the only woman probably in that little circle of people that he's in, and there had to be some kind of look, right? There had to be some kind of
An
how did she turn around and say something?
So did he change his mind? Because he said, my time's not yet come.
But I don't think his time is about miracles.
Yeah.
His time,
Okay,
his
so he's-
time, I think his time is about suffering. His time is about confrontation. It's about putting the powers of evil and oppression on notice, about exhausting people. But his time, I mean, the thing that makes Jesus distinct from the other men and women who stand in the prophetic tradition is his death. How he died, the way he died, his antagonism to the powers that resulted in his death, and then his subsequent defeat of death. But nobody else did that, not like that. I mean, Elijah, Elisha, So I mean, all kinds of people did miracles. I mean, think about the Shulamite widow, or I mean, like people can make more food. That's not what makes Jesus Jesus.
But can we agree that speaking to God, speaking to Jesus, is a prayer? I mean, there was a request, whether it was suggested here.
Sure.
There was a request. There was a prayer to Jesus. And the prayer was, we have a problem. It's a serious problem. The family could be fine. The family could be in legal issues for not having enough wine to fulfill the party, right?
Yeah, or humiliated.
Or humiliated.
Yeah, I
or
didn't know
whatever.
about that. That was news to me, that there could have potentially been a little.
There could have been
bit of
legal
a
ramifications to
little legal ramification to it. That ramps it up a little. I think embarrassment would be the
The
one I'd
reputation.
lean to, the reputation.
Shame,
But-
honor shame.
Honor shame, yeah.
Yeah.
Honor shame issue, but which could have additional consequences later, economic, everything.
Yeah.
But,
And then, my question is also, how long was there no wine? And how long did it take somebody to notice? Because it's not like you fill those jars. Again, you kind of just hook up a hose to it. And how long did the whole process take, and what happened? There had to have been some like layers of suspension. Like, hey, wine's on the way.
Jesus is at that thing, and it starts to just slowly drip, and then his mom says, "They have no wine." As he's got the last little drip. But then it takes. But your point is that it takes what, a couple hours?
It's got to take some time, right?
They have no wine.
It's not immediate gratification in the process. Something had to happen.
you know what though? I'll push on that. I think it, at least the way John writes, it gives an indication that it's quicker, not slower. And that is in direct juxtaposition in my mind to how long the winemaking process typically is. So does that make sense? So
Oh, yeah.
that piece of it, for me, gives you go with Lynn. Where are the opposites? What true winemaking and exceptional winemaking is a long
Years.
Yeah.
this is
Instant.
this is
Yeah.
in terms of just the way it reads.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I think there's power in that element of it. The other thing where I see just a ton of power is in the servants' obedience, not knowing what they're participating in, and how often are we called to act out in obedience, and we're thinking, God, what does this have to do with what you and I are?
With me.
You know, with what I want to do with my ministry. Why are you telling me to do something?
They probably just thought they were getting more water, more ceremonial wine,
Right.
which is fascinating to go. If anything, they're expecting another sacrament.
Oh, yeah.
They're expecting another ritual.
Yes.
They're thinking it's going to be a spiritual miracle, not a party miracle, which is a really sharp distinction in Jesus' ministry. Most of his parables are party parables.
Do you think that was only the servants though that went to get it? I mean, if there was an issue of timing, do you think it was just the servants that went to fill the jars? Or would it have been like, this is a collective?
All hands on deck.
All hands on deck, guys, let's fill this up.
Well, I was looking up ceremonial washing.
Yeah.
I don't know a ton about it, so but a lot of the things I've read, it's you bathe your flesh in running water. So then I go, is it nearby? Is it right there? Like
Well,
make it even have to go get it.
probably,
Yeah. Which would make a difference in time.
Yeah, my sense from the reading and from studying is that they probably didn't even dip their hands in it themselves. That's what the servants are for.
Right.
So they're standing there, they're holding out there because they couldn't be bothered to do that. So they would be scooping it out, pouring it on. So the idea that it's dirty, I mean, it is.
Maybe.
But the idea of them like putting it all in and stuff is, in that kind of a household, in that kind of an event, ceremony, they're pouring it from a vessel over their hands, over whatever to cleanse.
So I think that Jesus kind of has a formula in the narrative here, and the formula required some things that work, some things that happen, and in order for the prayer to be fulfilled or the request to be fulfilled or something like that. And along that process, it just takes time, right? You're like, again, it could have been accelerated because water turned into wine quickly and the instant when they were filled or whenever it was done or in the process of the ladle or
Gotcha.
whatever,
Yeah.
but there was a process that had to happen. The jars had to be filled work had to be put into place in order for the end result to happen. And it makes me wonder how many times I've asked God for something to happen and I'm just expecting God to resolve it when there's components that I'm needing to do, right? Like, let's take
Participate in your own miracles.
yeah, let's take the phrase is work while we wait for the response or the miracle or something like that. So I want you to think through what's the last thing or one of the big things that you ask God to do that you're waiting for him, and what is in your hands to work for in order to get that. If you want to lose 100 pounds or 10 pounds, do you just keep doing what you're doing and wait for God to resolve the weight issue? No, you're going to get up and walk, you're going to start exercising, you're going to start doing various components so that the request happens. So what's happening?
So you made the point early, the servants find out first. The ones who are obedient are the ones who get a front row seat to the miraculous. Then you made the point that it's going to take some time. Maybe it only took them an hour, who knows? But I mean, it took something. I mean, those things of water are 50 pounds each, and that's what, 5 gallons? So a 20-gallon stone jar, like even if they only got to get water across the street, like that's still, me and 3 other guys can't do that in 10 minutes. That takes so let's say it takes an hour. So during that whole time they're working, but not seeing any results.
Yeah, I'm wondering, John mentioned the fact that they had servants understood first. They got, like, maybe they're the first people to get the miracle because they probably tasted it. Maybe they were ones going, hey, what is this? Is this a special fun?
It's
I
not
was
dirty anymore.
drawn to the fact that like people who got Jesus first, famous prostitutes, servants, like you mentioned first, people at the bottom who got him first. Maybe it's John put this in there because throughout this whole ministry that happens over and over.
But I think there's a history of Jesus' miracles and the work that he's done. And up to this
Absolutely.
point, there's not. So
Right.
the hope that the servants would have, if they knew about who Jesus was or what he was capable of,
Or heard about
wouldn't have existed yet.
Though, I mean, like in all the other gospels, after Jesus gets the Holy Spirit, it's like miracles start happening left and right all over the place. John does like a rewrite history thing. So you, to some extent, you know, is this like well into, we already know Jesus has done a bunch of things, or is it the very first thing he does?
regardless of whether it's the first, last, or middle, I think the point that's happening here is that the miracle happened after your response to Jesus. Right? Fill the jars with water, right? Period. Then something will happen. They don't even know what's going to happen yet, but the response from Jesus was put some work in, and in faith. It's insinuated that something is going to happen. Just put the work in, and oftentimes I think we're just waiting for our prayers to be responded to, for something to happen, and there's an element of causality if we're able to maximize the work that we can handle, right? Who's the author that says, you handle the natural and God will add the super, and together we'll make the supernatural. Right? So what was the natural elements that had to happen? Fill the jars. The natural work out. Make phone calls to get donors.
Right.
Knock on doors to start working through relationships. Right? The normal things that have to happen, and let God start feeding in the supernatural additions to your complaint. So interestingly enough, Jesus' leadership in this process was a complaint came. The complaint department was open. We're out of wine. And there were 4 things that he did. Simplified the problem. The problem is very vast. Wine can't just be made instantaneously because it takes time to grow and cure it and do the thing, or maybe even to go find, can you find that many gallons?
You can't just run down to Crown Liquor.
You can't just run down a problem. So simplify the problem. Eliminated the obstacles. If we had wine, where would we put it? If we had, so start eliminating the problem. What do we have around us? Well, we have the jars. He automated the process. Let's start a chain, right? The servants start the chain of work. So he automated the process and he delegated to the people that were going to do the work. So the leadership formula for Jesus was simplify, automate, eliminate, and delegate. So that and put the natural elements in place so that the supernatural can happen. And it makes me wonder in our organizations and in our ministries if we're overcomplicating, if we're just waiting for Jesus to do things or for the Holy Spirit to do things, if we're not eliminating the issues or the problems around it because of fear or because of whatever might be happening, and if we're just not delegating appropriately and enough. Jesus didn't go and fill the jars himself. He asked the servants to do it.
It's interesting that he asks servants to serve. The guests to remain guests. He doesn't try and change anybody. It doesn't try and get them. It doesn't turn guests into servants here. Like you made the point, or doesn't ask his disciples to serve. Like he's using people where they're at, doing what they were already doing to accomplish.
Called to do.
Yeah.
It's one of the cooler archaeological finds were clay jars in Cana.
Oh, really?
I was
Yeah.
wondering about that.
And I haven't heard much about it, but did they scrape any of them to see if there was wine residue? I don't know. But it makes you wonder, those jars, were they ever used for ceremonial ritual washing again? I wouldn't think so. It would feel weird to do it, maybe. Just make it
Ready-made, huh?
Yeah, because that's just one of those rando laws. It's one of
What do
the
they put on display?
the Pharisees list, right? Of 600, where like you got to do this right before you touch this, or
like you said, I had to be running.
living.
Had to be poured.
So it just makes you wonder, like that thing that had been used to ritually make you okay for a period of time had now been used as a feast. Like, how do you go back and ever use those again that way?
It's like everything's holy now.
Yeah.
Even the party.
Yeah.
Everything's fun. It's all good.
Yeah, but there's no sort of feeling that, yes, it was a miracle. I would push back on that because I'm thinking, because there were jars that they needed to use, and necessity trumps ceremony. But not that, and I think like every time someone washed from that again, they would be reminded of that miracle. Like to me, it's almost more special to then put it back into service.
So you get to use that.
Yeah.
Or did they just keep turning into wine?
I think
I need to wash my hands.
that would be like,
I'm washing my beard, guys.
I think Cana Family Vineyards.
Yeah.
or it would be like the Holy Grail, right? We'd all be looking for that jar, like it would be admissible at this point, if that was true.
And mug of St. Arnold. It kept refilling the
Refilling,
beer,
yeah.
no matter how many people drank it.
People
It was beer.
venerate, there's churches there now. People started going to that where they felt that place was.
I love Len's what if that they sold all the bottles, like the leftover wine, and then
Quite wealthy.
Was
To
that
fund the ministry.
Caiaphas'
Well, it wasn't
bottle?
like it was cheap tasting wine.
Right,
If
right.
the response was usually,
You wait till everybody's drunk to give them the cheap wine.
What do you think?
but you save this until the end.
It is a fascinating miracle because you go, why did Jesus do this? Like, what was the point? When he heals lame people, the point is so they can walk. when he heals blind people so that they can see. But Jamin, I think, is onto something connecting this both to Genesis and to the crucifixion, because you're like, no, otherwise there's no real point. Like, great, so people got drunk again. Like that's
It's like an entry-level miracle.
yeah, it's a there's no
Training wheels.
Yeah.
there's no payoff other than pleasure, which you go, well, sure, we can make that argument. I mean, Jesus likes parties.
More compassion
Yeah.
for the family,
And eating.
avoiding the shame. Avoiding the shame.
Yeah.
But it's also a connection to his divinity and his power over creation. So it's a revelation miracle
Yeah, it's
and not a healing miracle.
Yeah, but like calming the storm.
Yeah.
Revelation.
That's a good point.
Feeding the 5,000.
And it calls us to be co-creators, right? Like the work the servants do.
Yeah.
It sort of echoes to now we have a responsibility for creating and creation. We don't have divinity, but we have responsibility.
But the wine could have been created had the servants not been asked.
This wasn't.
Mary turned around.
This
and
wasn't
asked-
ex nihilo. This was.
Yeah. Mary said, turn around and said, do whatever he says. And then he spoke, and then it happened. If the guy can make this happen, you think that he really needed the
Like he
servants?
could have
Yeah,
filled
you
the
think
jars
really-
with himself.
But it is I mean, God rarely does things for us. He'll do things with us. He'll do things through us. He did one thing for us.
Kind of the whole point behind this was to co-labor. And then there's sometimes where we partner with him where he's already doing it all. I was reading the story of Jacob and the sheep, where he's got to get speckled, striped, and spotted sheep, right? And God gave him a dream, like, this is what you're aiming for. And he can't produce that because he only has monochrome sheep. But in his mind, if the sheep have sex in front of polka dots, they make polka dotted sheep, right? So he puts out the polka dots, and sure enough, he gets them. And we're all like, oh, that's not how science works. But like, he's trying to co-labor with God, even though God's doing it all anyways.
Yeah.
And biblically, he thinks he's successful, even though it was all on God's hand.
And that was fun.
That's good. We have sex.
That's for Dalmatian.
That's a Christian.
That's my preach. That's
It took me a minute just to remember how we got to polka dots there. Co-labor. Yeah, co-labor. All right.
I mean, the co-laboring is huge throughout the Bible, though, both between
It is.
the heavenly realm, the earthly realm. Even getting yesterday, God comes up before the divine council, trying to give her to King Ahab's like, how we do it. A bunch of spirits present ideas. One's like, I can go be a lying spirit in the mouth of Ahab's prophets. God's like, that'll work, let's do that. It's like God could have come up with his own answer, but instead, like, all right, angels, what's the plan? And I think he does that with humans the same way. Like, yeah. All right, guys, what's your plan? Work alongside.
Well, what's he supposed to do? I mean, of course God's going to work through his creation. Because why else would he bother creating?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to make them, why not enjoy it?
Otherwise, robots.
So what was it that drew you to this passage? You reach out and you're like, yeah, I really want to get into this passage. Was it the process that Jesus liked?
I'm a practical person, so I want to know, what do I have to do for X to be accomplished? And in the passage, the response came for the response to the request or whatever happened after the work was put in. The work was fill the jars, and then the miracle happened. And to me, it makes me wonder what jars God is asking me to fill in order for the promise, the fulfillment, you name it, has to happen. Just tell me what to do. And if you don't tell me that, I'm going to start trying to figure out on my own until, in faith, that you're going to deliver on something. So I think, in a way, the heroes in the story, or the obedience is the heroism in the story, because they I don't see any kind of grumbling. It probably happened because they didn't want to do this, but the fulfillment happened when the jars were filled to the brim. Not like halfway through it or at what point. It
Right.
doesn't say when. Just
When
like
all their work was.
when the work was complete,
Yeah.
then draw some out and take it to the master. Okay. Sometimes I think that we might be on the third jar,
Right.
and we just have to keep working our fulfillment of the request. On our 5th phone call to a donor, on our 3rd discipleship series before somebody gets it, on our, you name it, you know what you've asked for. Are you fulfilling the natural components?
Yeah, so Seth Godin has a good piece about that where he says 90% complete is still incomplete.
Yeah.
So like if they'd only filled 3 or 5 jars, if they'd only filled all 6 jars, but only 90% of the way, that's not filled to the brim. So the miracle doesn't happen until all your work is done in this story.
You're not going to achieve your degree
Yeah.
until you submit and defend.
You have to
Right.
turn in the dissertation. How many
And defend.
non-doctorates are there?
Yeah.
Everything but dissertation.
ABDs, yeah.
Is that what it is? Yeah.
Well, that's good. Any other insights in there that anybody sees? No response from his mom. Like mom says, all right, Jesus, here's the problem. Mom says to the servants, do whatever he tells you. But then there's no word about Mary afterwards.
Well, the next one is he went to Capernaum with her. Clearly, she wasn't mad.
She wasn't.
Because it's a long walk.
Yeah.
It's a long walk.
That's funny.
She may not have remembered.
Which makes me
Yeah.
wonder. It makes me wonder how present she was. Like we don't often hear about her presence, but was she more present to him throughout his ministry than we have in our minds?
Yeah, I mean, she shows up a lot. Like she.
But we don't think about that. Like it's sort of not in our psyche to give her much thought. At this point in his life. For me, anyway.
Yeah, was she itinerant with him in that full sense?
The gospel seems to indicate who she was.
Yeah.
It's a couple times he goes off by himself. It only mentions he and his disciples. But,
It wasn't like she stays. Did she have a home base? Like she's usually in Bethany,
yeah,
or she's usually in Capernaum. You think that I'm thinking about the places that are pretty pertinent. I mean, common.
Yeah.
Because Jesus had little home bases.
Yeah.
Right.
Right after this, he went to Capernaum as well.
Yeah.
But like, how empowering for him, especially in John. Is it John where all his brothers and sisters are always trying to pull him away because they think he's crazy, And mom from the beginning is like, guys, where's Joseph? Who knows?
Yeah.
What I like is that the bridegroom was pulled aside and praised. Like,
Well, like you said, it goes from not just avoidance of shame, but to actual praise.
Yeah.
Right. So we're not, and again, it doesn't just get wine taking care of it. It's the best one. And so that's what I love. It's the extremes that you see in this that are so just in your face as I read this. I will tell you, it's a big deal. Just a little sidebar story. When Jennifer and I got married, we could not afford, I was a youth pastor at a large church, and so we didn't really want to not invite families of kids. We've been there 7 years, and I'd done studies. So we knew that it would be a large attended wedding because basically anybody in the church that was connected was invited. But we knew we couldn't have all those people to a reception, right, for dinner. So we had about 2.5 hours between the wedding
and the reception so that we could do a cake and punch reception at the church to include all those others. And when we were kind of getting all the arrangements done, the baker we used it for, it's when you're doing that, it's this much per piece of cake. And so as they were talking through it, we were like, oh my gosh, cake for 100 is one thing. Cake for 800 is a wholly different, I mean, from an expense standpoint. And so it got to where this cake was massive and expensive, but it was still so much cheaper than if we tried to do a buffet for that many people, right? Even if it was a cheap buffet. So we went all in on the cake. If any of you ever want to see a picture, I'll show it. It was 7 tiers. They then sat it on a big round table. I kid you not, the top of the cake was about to here. And it was almost, it felt a little weird as we started to, because I didn't know that's how big it was gonna. She said, oh, okay. And there wasn't like we knew we were going all in on the cake and the quality and all that, and we knew they weren't gonna bring out cheap cakes. But I never in my mind imagined, okay, it's been 22 years. I still have guy friends say, that's the most amazing wedding cake I've ever seen or eaten in my entire life. So we went from our goal was not to impress. Our goal was to hospitality for everybody. We want to include all these people. And I think God just honored.
Bless your cake.
Bless the cake. Well, but honored the heart, honored the heart of generosity and hospitality with what could have been embarrassing. It wasn't. They were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And people thanking us for inviting them to their wedding reception. We never said, oh, well, you didn't quite make the cut. There's only 150 of us going to dinner. They all thought they were invited to the wedding reception. But if we don't try to do that cake.
Isn't that the kind of lie Dave was talking about yesterday?
Yeah.
Prejudice of love.
That's right. Prejudice of love. Yeah.
Did you have another cake? At your
No,
small
we didn't
reception?
do cake at the other one.
Sure, there wasn't a person that stuck inside the cake that you left.
I think they did take all the leftover cake to the other place, and I think probably people had cake again later. I don't recall it though. But yeah, it was
Yeah, I'm ready for chocolate peanut butter pie. All right, let's.
no, I mean, I love cake. To this day, I'm a cake eater.
Hey, you?
You appreciate that?
Absolutely. All right, so we're
Everybody does.
let's take a little break.
Eaters.
Corey can go eat cake by himself in his room.
Bye.
We'll meet upstairs at 10:45.
Melissa, stop. Stop. Yeah, stop.